Hi, everybody. Thank you for bearing with me. It's always a little bit of a sort of challenge to set up for these things. There's a lot of moving parts, so getting kind of lighting, make sure light the lighting right, making sure the microphone's working, etc. Um, so yeah, had a little mini technical issue before I joined, but I'm hoping that everybody can hear me okay. And yeah, please let me know if it's your first time here or if you were here last week because we talked about attachment styles and kind of started on that topic last week, and it was super, super popular, which is why we're doing it again today. It's a little quiet on your phone, B. Um, I'm gonna test something, and this might be marginally annoying, but let me know if you can hear this when I do this. Can you hear? I'm just trying to figure out if the microphone is working correctly. Is the audio okay for everyone else? Please let me know if not. Um, can anyone else let me know if the audio? Oh, it's a bit quiet. That's really annoying. Hold on. Don't know why that would be. Give me 1 second. Just gonna figure out. Is that better or was it better before? I've put it on the MacBook microphone now, and I'm get back on the mic that I'm holding. Can anyone tell me which was better? Was it better when I was using this microphone or when I had it connected to the Mac? I am, and honestly, I'm pretty happy that we've gotten to. I think this is live number 12 or something, and this is the first time I've had actual sound errors. Okay, fine. It's a bit quiet. Well, I'll try and speak as kind of clearly as I can. And B, I'm assuming already that you've put the volume up as much as you could. If anyone else has it a bit quiet, let me know, and I can try and project. Yeah, I don't know why that is because it's kind of generally been fine. But can you, if I'm going to tap the microphone and tell me if you can hear like a tapping sound, because then I'll at least know the microphone's working. Can you guys hear that? Well, either way, I think we'll get started. Could you hear the tapping on the microphone, anyone? And if a kind of you could, then I know that definitely worked. Okay, fab. Right, so the mic is doing something. Hang on. If you could hear that, because if it's using the laptop mic, then it wouldn't pick up on that. Okay, fab. Thank you, Neil, for the feedback. So how many of you were here last week? Can you let me know in the chat if you were at kind of part one of this session last week or not? And if not, we'll kind of briefly recap, and also I'll put session one on YouTube, so you can catch up on that. But we basically started a little exploration into attachment styles, kind of what they are, why they're important, and how they kind of influence our ability to connect with other people, and kind of where misunderstandings can crop up, and how we can use an understanding of that to help or hinder our kind of connections with others. So this is kind of a follow-up on that. We'll explore some of the things that we covered last week in a little bit more detail, and also some other points as well. So this is Jyoti. This is your first time. Liz, you went at the last one as well. Oh, cool. So I've got a bunch of newbies. There's a couple of regulars who I'm sure will join later on. They don't always join bang on time, but yeah, it's great to have you all here. So thank you for coming, and thank you for sort of tuning in. So just for a little intro into kind of what I do, what I talk about. Hi, Kathleen. Nice to meet you. For everybody who doesn't know me, my whole kind of thing, or my passion, my focus, and what I feel I'm here for is to essentially inspire, talk about, and kind of raise the importance of themes around connection and community for everyone. Everyone that comes into the space, everyone that I kind of interact with. And the reason for that is that we're lonelier and more isolated than we've ever been before. So while we're connected digitally, people actually don't spend as much time around one another in a meaningful way as we used to. And I think, I talk about this all the time, and those of you who are my regulars will kind of be bored of hearing about this probably by now. But, when we go to the store, for example, we rarely actually speak to or check out with a human now. Everything's done with like the screens. And that's happening in every area of life more and more. And so we're losing those little moments where you would kind of walk past somebody or make eye contact, or even do the small talk thing, like asking the cashier what time they finish work, and you know whatever. And while those little things might seem sort of inconsequential and not that significant, it actually does make a difference, because we're as humans, we're social beings. We're meant to be sort of in communication, in contact with other people on a consistent basis. And if you even think about it, back in the day, however long ago, like caveman times, like really, really far back, we would have been living in communities. We wouldn't have been living in like households or flats the way that we do now. And I was actually having a conversation with somebody just yesterday, and I was saying that, no wonder so many people are struggling in relationships, because if you just live with your partner, or your partner and your kids, that's a lot of like pressure on one person to kind of be your main primary sort of contact and the main person that you speak to on a daily basis. Whereas, historically people would have lived in bigger groups just for kind of safety reasons, and also just there wouldn't have been like that much shelter. So people would have lived in like tribes, communities, and we're living in a way that's sort of very far removed from that. So that's kind of the themes that I talk about. And, some of the areas we've covered previously are like how you can make new friends, how you can meet people who are aligned with your values, so that, if you're trying to grow in a particular area or an aspect of your life, for example, health and fitness or spirituality, or you've got a particular hobby that you'd like to kind of engage more in, being surrounded by like-minded people who are also interested in that and who you can do that with is one really powerful way of doing that. And also, spending time with people that make you feel good. Many of us, we've talked about this before, where people have friendships and people they hang out with just because they've known them for a really long time, but actually they have very little in common. And often it's a sort of one-sided relationship. So some of the things we've covered in previous sessions are like how you can actually engage with people who are your wavelength, or who are going to help you to grow and become the person that you want to be and live the life that you sort of, I don't want to say like dream of, but the life that you're meant to live. And to help, like, people who will help you fulfill what it is that you're here to do or what you want to do. So yeah, that's like a little intro on what we cover here. With regards to attachment and the kind of topics we're going to cover today, like attachment, and sort of anxiousness around that, like anxious attachment particularly, and also avoidant attachment style. I know those are words that get talked about loads at the moment. So does anyone have any kind of understanding or experience with any of these terms, or has anybody read the book Attached? If you guys just share a little bit in the chat, so then I can tailor the session based on who we have in the room and what everybody's understanding is, more or less. Okay, so Eleanor's got some understanding of attachment. Anybody else want to chime in? So basically last week we did a bit of a combination of just kind of a bit of a group discussion, and people shared some of their experiences. And then we also, I kind of shared bits from a book called Attached that I found really insightful and personally really surprised me. And I'm somebody who, I know a lot about kind of attachment style, and I personally have anxious attachment, and it can sometimes show up in quite big ways. Okay, so Stephen, you were here last week. Stephen, if you don't mind, I don't mean to put you on the spot, so feel free to not like respond to this or say that you don't remember. But what were your main kind of takeaways from last week? Was there anything that you found particularly interesting or surprising from what we talked about last week, or from what I shared or read? And also, what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh yeah, a reminder to hydrate. If you haven't had any water today, or you need a little nudge to drink some water or tea, please do. Neil, you're detached from the book, lol. There's a lot of you have really great sense of humor on Insight Timer. We had some really good jokes last week as well. And so if you want to kind of catch up on that, I'll be posting that on YouTube in due course. So, and also for anyone that's new here, I do a weekly live session on usually Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. It depends, the day depends on my schedule, but typically it'll be at 9 p.m. UK time, which is the time we are on today. So, let's see, where are we? So actually, I kind of shared quite a few things last week that were around attachment theory. Typically, one of the big things that I found really surprising when I read Attached, and I haven't finished reading it by any means. It's called Attached. And so when I started reading it, one of the things that really surprised me is as somebody with anxious attachment, I kind of have always believed or thought that, oh, there's something wrong with me. I need to, stop being so like needy or, taking things personally or being so sensitive, etc. Whereas in fact, as human beings, and there's a lot of evidence in the book around this, we're actually designed to relate to other people, and we're designed to live live in a way where we regulate ourselves by the people closest to us, whether that's our primary caregivers or the person that we choose to be in a relationship with. And there's loads of evidence around this. So for example, one of the things, a study that they did was that when they delivered like bad news or something to a group of women, and they kind of, the way they tested this is they got women, they told women on their own, and then they took another group of women and they told them while they were holding a stranger's hand, and then they told another group of women while they were holding their partner's hand, and they measured like the stress response in each of these women. And the first actually, wait, hold on, Stephen, is this Stephen that I've been from our show, Stephen? Which I think it is. Okay, cool. So Stephen, I actually know through kind of a really cool like volunteering community show thing that I'm doing. And so he actually watched the video for last week's session this morning. But yeah, and also just I want to flag, I feel like my energy is really off today. And like Stephen, you've watched last week's one. I feel like I was far more in flow then than I am now. But I think for me, with doing these lives, I still want to be really consistent and do one a week. And I think sometimes we end up like getting really interesting insight, and things happen and come up organically. So regardless of the fact that, I didn't feel as in flow doing this as I normally do, let's see what happens and let's have a great time. So yeah, one of the things that this study showed was that the women who were holding their partner's hand when they were told this bad news, basically had lower levels of stress, and especially those who reported that they had a close, loving relationship with their partner. And this was obviously compared to when they were holding a stranger's hand, or holding. Wait, did I say that right? Sorry. So the ones holding their partner's hand had the least stress response, because there was a measured impact on them holding their partner's hand when they were being given bad news. The women who were holding a stranger's hand, that helped like a little bit, but only marginally. And then the ones who were just on their own, they had the highest stress response, but it wasn't that different to when they were holding a stranger's hand. So what that shows is that actually, sometimes when, let's say, we need like physical or emotional or verbal like validation or comfort or whatever from our partner, it actually does make a difference to our like emotional health, our kind of psychology, and our mental health in a tangible way. And that can be the difference between us having really like big emotional reactions, or being soothed and feeling safe and okay. And one of the things that Attached kind of posits is that partners, a kind of secure, healthy partner, should be soothing, like they should take responsibility for their partner's well-being, like not in a way that's unhealthy, but obviously, so Neil just said sometimes people are strangers to their partners, which doesn't help. Yeah. And I think a lot of it is because, there can be issues with communication, understanding. And I think that's something that I'm learning more and more through like doing these sessions and just kind of life and growing up, right? we don't think the way that anyone else does. So when like we're thinking or doing something, and I think I said this in the last video and probably in a session previously, we're like, we know that we're coming from a good place, we understand where we're coming from, and what we're saying or doing and why, and we've got a reason for it. But then when someone else is acting in a way that maybe we're not like comfortable with, or isn't familiar to us, or isn't the way that we would have done it, we can easily misunderstand or kind of misinterpret their intentions. And I think especially, when, let's say, like attachment styles come into play, and I mean, fundamentally, for those of you who kind of don't know loads about attachment styles, so there's secure attachment and there's insecure attachment styles. Like those are the two kind of broad, like if they're just split half and half. And there's within that, it's a spectrum, and there's kind of people have a mix of the two, people have other variations of it. And you might have like some elements of anxious attachment in some areas, and then you might have some elements of avoidant attachment style in others. So ultimately, people who have secure attachment typically have had kind of a healthy, stable upbringing in which they felt safe. They felt like their needs were met. They were picked up when they cried. They felt like heard and seen growing up. And then also their early relationships were like healthy and sort of fairly balanced. And they haven't had any reason to kind of doubt people or to kind of mistrust, or they're pretty like comfortable, and they think like, oh, hey Lauren, lovely to see you. So Peter Brook is also Lauren, if anyone doesn't know that. I can read. So yeah, people who have secure attachment style, they had healthy kind of initial like young adult relationships, and they had a healthy kind of upbringing in childhood. So the key thing is that people assume that people who have insecure attachment styles, like anxious attachment or avoidant attachment style, people kind of have, and I thought this previously, I'm like, oh, it's because I've had like childhood trauma. But that's not the case at all. Actually, it can be smaller things like, if your parents were busy and put you in childcare a lot, or if they were busy and didn't have time to like listen to you all the time, and things like that, or just it can be like smaller things that you wouldn't think are like like capital T trauma, like massive things. And ultimately, what insecure attachment is, it's like anxious or avoidant are two sides of the same coin. So basically, people who have anxious attachment styles, they, as a child or in their early relationships, they basically felt like, oh, I can't rely on, my caregivers aren't going to meet my needs, or, they're going to abandon me. And there's this fundamental fear of like rejection, abandonment, kind of not being good enough, etc. And the way that kind of plays out is that you cling on, and you basically think that you're sort of fearful of being let down, and therefore you kind of overcompensate and try to ensure that your parent, lover, whoever isn't gonna just leave you and abandon you, or isn't gonna meet your isn't gonna fail to meet your needs. Whereas avoidant attachment style is very interesting. It's the other side of the same coin. So in that case, you didn't have your needs met as a child and or in your kind of early relationships. So then you basically go down the path of, well, I can't trust anyone anyway. So, I'm not going to get too close to anybody. So they're kind of the same thing happened, but they're kind of played out and interpreted in different ways. Let me just catch up on the comments. Hi, Jennifer. Nice to see you. So Neil said, so all our experiences from childhood are recorded and inform us, but we can create a new recording, renew our sense of self. So yes, exactly. And I think, it's the same as anything. Like, let's say you didn't go to the gym and you never worked out, and then you started to slowly exercise and work on it, and you kind of built up that muscle, and your body and your physiology changed, your health changed. It's a similar thing with attachment styles, right? Like you can grow and kind of change and improve and like break the patterns that you have. But the problem is with kind of anything that we're trying to work on, especially when it comes to sort of habitual behaviors or mindset, the way our mind works, or things that we're doing repeatedly, or like habits. So as an example, one of the things that I kind of struggle with when it comes to anxious attachment is if I feel a fear of like rejection or abandonment, or let's say like if I've been in a relationship and my partner has cancelled on me at the last minute, but not for a reason that I deem to be like valid, or nothing, if it's not for like a clear thing that I can understand, like just because they were tired or because they like wanted to see a friend or something, that can like trigger that, something like that, something small like that can trigger that fear of abandonment in me, and then I can get super upset, where like, let's say the situation was like a 1 or 2 out of 10, but my reaction will be like an 8 or 9 out of 10. And it's because we're not reacting from a place of and one thing that a therapist like said to me once is that whenever we're reacting from in a really big massive way that isn't actually in line with the situation, and it's let's say situation's a 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10, and our reaction is like 7 or 8, or whatever, there's a difference between objectively what the situation is and what our reaction is. Whenever we're in those kinds of situations, it's because something from our past is being triggered. So in that instance, it's like I'm not reacting as Priyanka in my 30s, having like someone just like let me down and cancel on me, which if I'm thinking objectively would just be mildly annoying. um i'm I'm like looking at it and I'm feeling it viscerally as, oh my god, like I'm in danger, I'm under threat. And that's kind of the place I'm coming from. There's like a real visceral fear, even though obviously it's not, I'm not actually unsafe, but that's how it feels. So 1 second. So the problem with this is that, and this is only, by the way, like it will only be with regards to like a romantic partner. I would be a bit annoyed if friends cancel last minute without a valid reason, mainly because I'm pretty consistent, I'm not flaky, I do the thing I say I'm going to do, so I expect the same from the people I'm close to. But I wouldn't get upset with like when a friend does it, in the same way I would if it was someone I'm like dating or in a relationship with, or someone I'm emotionally invested in that way. So the point I was going to make was that the way that I look at kind of changing behaviors and pathways, and someone I heard this ages ago, and I really love the analogy. It's like visually fantastic, but also really true. So if you imagine a field and you walk the same path like through the field every day, and eventually the grass will get worn down there, and eventually an actual path will form. Now, what happens is obviously anybody else that's going to come to that field, or next time you go to the field, you're going to be like, oh, let me just walk down this path. And that becomes the easiest, sort of most comfortable path of least resistance. And you don't have to think about it, and you just do it, right? You could do it with your eyes closed. You've walked that path so many times. Where the problem is that when we then like realize actually maybe this isn't the best path, maybe it's a little bit dangerous, or it's not the kind of healthiest path to walk. And by path, I mean, I'm talking about habits or behaviors that don't serve us or aren't, in our highest good. So when you want to then change that up and take a different path or do something differently, the problem is that path is already there and it's so clearly defined and it's so automatic that you want to go that way. But what you need to do, and it takes time and it takes patience and it takes repeated practice and persistence. But if you want to make a new path and do things differently, then imagine you're going to create a new path next to it that's a different path. And eventually what will happen is you'll start taking this new path, and that path will end up getting like, the grass will kind of separate again, the path will form. And the old path you had, the grass will eventually grow back over, and you'll have formed a new path. But it is literally, you're going to have to do it a million times, and you're going to have to leave that previous path alone. So that's kind of how, but also why it takes so long sometimes to kind of reset behaviors. So let me just have a look at the comments. So, and also guys, Stephen, I think it's his first time on Insight Timer, and definitely his first time on one of our lives. So please welcome him. So Lauren, you missed this, but Stephen's someone who I'm like volunteering with at the moment for the show that I mentioned previously. So B said, bingo, that's me. I don't get attached and then I can't get hurt. Yeah. So, and it's interesting that. So the other ways that kind of that avoidant attachment style plays out, and B, maybe you can comment and tell us, like, you're the avoidant in the room. So maybe you can tell us that your experience, but do you also like if there's like conflict, would you prefer to just like walk away from it and not deal with the situation? Because that's something that's quite common to people who have avoidant attachment styles. And also, interestingly, people who have avoidant attachment style are barely um are barely in sessions like this and situations like this, because by nature they are avoidant, and they don't have, there's less inclination to kind of like do the work or be self-aware, and therefore it's mostly people who are kind of secure or who have anxious attachment style who find themselves in spaces like this and actually are, open to like learning and understanding these things. So Eleanor, you said you've got an avoidant attachment style but you're healing. Cool. So I think we had more people with an anxious attachment style in the last session. Um, but so B said, I was brought up in the care system, never had the attention I needed, so I had to toughen up, and it has stayed with me. I have to rely on myself. I don't like conflict. I'm a peacemaker. I like the easy life. Yeah. So this is an interesting thing, B, because there'll be other people who had a similar upbringing to you, but who went the other way and actually became more anxiously attached as a result. So I don't quite know entirely what the factors are, and what it is that causes someone to become avoidant or anxiously attached. But I do know that it's the same kind of root cause. I don't know if there is evidence or kind of any understanding of what the which way people go when they get to that point. And Lauren said, I think my partner's avoidant and I'm the opposite. Yeah, and I talked about this last week, that's super common, like opposites attract. So people who are anxiously attached will quite often gravitate towards people who are avoidant, and people who are avoidant will quite often gravitate towards people who have anxious attachment style. And it's because being with being with the opposite essentially allows you to believe, or to kind of, it maintains your belief and your experience of like, oh, people are really like clingy, or oh, I'm going to be let down and I'm afraid of abandonment, and therefore you pick an avoidant partner who will, because that feels familiar to whatever you had growing up. So Stephen says, I suspect my avoidant tendencies are an unconscious attempt to balance my anxious tendencies. Yeah, and Stephen, I mentioned this to you in the last. I think I mentioned it in the last live. Tell me if I'm wrong, because it's been a week since I recorded that, but Stephen listened to it today. Um, I have anxious attachment, but I have found that in certain situations I can be avoidant, and largely I find that I'll be avoidant with people who are securely attached, because they're consistent, they're predictable, and therefore they don't feed the kind of like emotional pain and drama and the stress that I'd be used to with somebody who has avoidant attachment style. And therefore, like, so if you have an insecure attachment style, if you then meet somebody who is securely attached, typically that can help you to become securely attached too. But it can also feel kind of boring, and because it's not what you're used to, right? So you're like, oh, because you're not, your body's your so when you are with somebody where they're the opposite of you in terms of anxious or avoidant, and you trigger each other, um your body ends up getting pumped full of like cortisol and other hormones, and you have the highs and the lows, and that becomes addictive. So then when you meet somebody who's nice and stable and able to kind of meet your needs, that can feel like boring, and that's super common. So I'm part of like a community and a course that's around like healing anxious attachment. um but what was I saying? And essentially in that, they that's one of the things that they say quite often, is that what seems boring is like quite often it's just because it's not like dramatic and horrible. So, Eleanor, you said, I recognize I'm different with different people. Yeah, and different partners and different people will bring out different parts of your attachment style, like bring out different qualities and tendencies in you. So, Linda, you said, B, I'm with you. Lost my mum very young and got tossed into a step family situation. I do have a lot of good friends, but there are boundaries. So, Linda, I feel like I think, yeah, I remember that we were talking about this. So I feel like you are basically saying that you've got good friends, but then you kind of keep them at arm's length a little bit. And Lauren, you said healing that though through self-care / development. Yeah, and I'm trying to do that too. I think one of the things that I would love to like need less of and do less is like seeking validation or seeking and needing validation. And then B, oh, we've got another B, but spelled differently. Wait. Oh yeah, no, we have two Bs. Brilliant. And I guess I just get on with it, but sometimes I get anxiety for random reasons. Like when I'm on holiday, I'm terrified about my cats. Yeah, so we're talking about specifically like anxious attachment in context of kind of like relationships and sort of in our kind of primary connections and relationships. And I talked last week as well about how it isn't just romantic relationships. It can be like, someone with anxious attachment, for example, might sort of work too hard and constantly like require or want validation from their boss or put up with mistreatment or bad behavior from their employer just because they like feel insecure or they kind of have a fear of like not being good enough. Whereas someone with a avoidant attachment style, which I have an ex who definitely like fit that, he changed jobs like every 2 months. And it's kind of, another classic trope with people who are avoidant is fear of commitment. So Jyoti said, how not to avoid someone is saying that hurt my feelings. How are you, Jyoti? Are you able to clarify your question a little bit? I don't want to misinterpret or misunderstand it. Do you mean how not to avoid somebody who says that you hurt their feelings or that they hurt your feelings? And Linda said, I'm happy though. Many people I know hate being alone with themselves, but honestly enjoy it. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of things actually that people who have anxious attachment and people who have avoidant attachment style can learn from each other. Um, about finding the like middle ground, because ultimately people with avoidant attachment style are over here, people with anxious attachment style are kind of over here, and then secure attachment is somewhere in the middle. And the other two are two extremes of the same kind of situation. I'm just gonna get the reading that I had for us. Give me a moment. So the kind of beginnings of, hang on, let's look at the comment. So Joe said, Linda, me too, hon. I've been on my own for over 20 years. Yeah, and Joe, how do you find that? Like you just enjoy your own company, or do you have other kind of relationships or connections or kind of community around you that you also um do enjoy as well? Because I think it's about having balance, right? I think like it's great to be able to enjoy your own company. I think that's important for everybody, regardless of your attachment style. But I think it's also important for us to have other connections or be part of something or have a sense of community or people that we can go to when we need help or when we need support as well. Oh, B, I'm really sorry to hear that. So B said, I lost my cat at the end of September. This is what happens when you get attached. Yeah, and I think it's interesting with pets because um they do obviously like the same way as human relationships, they do, it does remind us that um I guess life is ephemeral and passing. And I think it's interesting to think about or look at the fact, and B, I hope you don't mind me asking this, and please tell me if feel free to not answer, but the cat that you had, would you have are you still glad that you had the time and the experience of the relationship with that pet? Or is the pain of losing them far greater and actually you wish you'd never experienced that? Which of the two kind of would you sort of which kind of can you relate to the most at the moment? So Linda says, me too, Joe, I'm a social introvert. And Joe, you've got your 3 dogs and busy doing stuff. You don't have friends or family. Okay, but Joe, you're here with all of us. And I think, you're part of this community. But also I think having dogs is a wonderful thing in terms of having like connection and, like, I'm sure they bring a lot of light and joy to your life. So B says, "B, I'm with you. Losing pets or something really close to you really, really hurts." Yeah, and I'm actually like terrified of that because I've got 3 guinea pigs, as many of you know, and they've been on some of my lives, which you can see them on YouTube if not. But I've never had pets before this, and I've never experienced what it feels like to lose a pet. I've had family members that I've lost, but not pets. And I do really kind of worry about that because I don't have a reference point, or I don't know how that would feel. So B says, "I'll not have any more pets as it is heartbreak when I lose them. The cat I had was my best friend who died 3 years ago. That broke me. Then I was left with his cat and I fulfilled, oh, it was your best friend's cat. Oh, and I fulfilled the promise that I would look after his cat until the end. That really broke me." Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of like sentiment and emotion in that whole situation. And I'm glad that you did kind of, you were able to fulfill that promise and sort of be there for your best friend and then for their cat. So Linda, "I love projects, taking care of my home, dabble in art, have a dog, retired now, but thinking a part-time job for socializing." Yeah, so there's actually a lot of evidence, and we've talked about this in other sessions, where actually having human connection, and I was saying this to Stephen the other day, but having human connection can really improve our actual health and well-being. So it can add kind of longevity. Basically, having purpose, having connection, and having like companionship can really help us in terms of our mental health, our physical health, also longevity. So there's we've talked about this before, where when you have older people who, let's say one of the partners passes away in a couple, then sometimes the other partner can pass away shortly thereafter, and they literally, and they say they die from heartbreak. And where that doesn't happen, typically what they found is where the remaining partner has other kind of friends, family, connections, community around them, that gives them still like a reason for being. They feel still like supported and they've got companionship, and they essentially won't die of loneliness compared to people in the same situation who didn't have anyone. So Jyoti said, "I don't want to avoid someone hurting my feelings, but keep distance." So Jyoti, do you mean you kind of are trying to protect yourself and keep a bit of distance, but it's not necessarily from a place of like avoidance? Is that right? So Joe, you said, "People nourish my soul. I'm an empath and will help anyone, but my family have rejected me for who I am. I think I'm emotionally shut down because I'm not accepted or understood." And Joe said, "Yes, this is my first time on here and I do have a community." Yeah, so and welcome to our session for the first time, Joe. Hope to have you back again. Generally everyone on here, not generally, always everyone on here is like super friendly and really welcoming, and if they recognize you in a future live, they'll obviously say hi as well. The thing I'd say, Joe, is one of the things that I've talked about before, which I think is quite interesting, because you mentioned about feeling kind of seen and understood and accepted. And I think that's where finding places, people, kind of hobbies, activities, situations, environments where we can like be our authentic selves and do things that give us meaning and purpose is so important. Because you know, I had a friend tell me she went to this she's kind of a holistic doctor, and she's moved into kind of more shamanic practicing stuff, and she went to a kind of course or something for like the shamanic stuff, and she was saying that the whole time that she was there she just felt like she didn't have to explain anything about herself or her interests, or she didn't have to like justify anything, and she felt like she could just be. And that made me just think how important it is to be in spaces where actually we don't have to like play a part, or push down parts of ourselves, or sort of try to be anything that we're not. And so I think it's so important to seek out kind of places, people, connections, communities where you can be and do that. So JG, nice to see you, by the way. You said, "Yes, my aunt was sick and my uncle passed first and then she died a month apart." Yeah. And I'm assuming, would I be right in thinking that they didn't have too much like of a social life or community or anything like that around them? So Stephen said, solid, agree on having connection that adds meaning to life. Volunteering really helps that. Yeah, it does. And for anyone that's just joined, so I know Stephen through some volunteering that we both do. And we only met, like we met kind of recently in the last few weeks, but like there's been such a nice connection and sort of, openness and like synergy between us. And um I feel like we've just had really like nice positive interactions and conversations. And I was actually thinking today, Stephen, when we were messaging, that like I genuinely do feel like we've got kind of, a meaningful, authentic connection, which obviously we have with a lot of people there as well. But yeah, I'm really grateful for you kind of also being here and listening to last week's one this morning. It's a lot of listening to my voice, isn't it, in one day? 3 hours. So Jotty, yeah. And so Joe, you said community now. Gunny, my runes, and tarot have told me to connect with community. Never ever gave Insight Timer a thought about community. Much gratitude. Yeah, so many of you won't know my story with Insight Timer, but especially those of you who are new. But I've been using Insight Timer for years, and I've been using it kind of just to listen to the recorded tracks and the recorded meditations, and then maybe like I think it must have been like 4 or 5 years ago now. Maybe actually 4 years ago, I think, I discovered the live sessions by accident. I was just kind of scrolling through and I realized that there were live sessions. And it was just after I'd gone through a breakup. So I was kind of suddenly living alone and it was much quieter in my house. And it was also during like kind of COVID lockdowny times. So it was basically like um a kind of then it was December. It was that period where it's cold and dark, and it's much easier to feel alone or feel lonely. And so I discovered the lives on here, and then basically started attending them. And there was a couple of teachers, particularly Catherine Ramati, I always shout out, who made me feel really kind of welcome and seen and just like part of the community. And then there's other teachers obviously that did the same as I went to more and more lives. And yeah, and Joe, that's an interesting thing. Not many people know about the live sessions. So if you know anyone who uses Insight Timer, like please tell them about the lives, because they are great. And as a free resource, they're fantastic. And I love like listening to them when I'm doing the washing up, when I'm getting ready for bed. So anyway, that's how I discovered them, and they really helped me to feel kind of connected and not alone, having just gone through a breakup at the time. And so, if I can create that experience for anyone else, like for anyone to just come here and feel sort of safe and seen and heard and supported, that's my real goal with this. And also, people, particularly where people need more kind of community and connection in their actual, like real lives in person. If I can help inspire or assist with you bringing that, you getting out of your comfort zone, or you kind of feeling inspired to connect with people, even if it's been a while since you did. Yeah, I would be thrilled. Because one of the things is obviously after COVID, we've all become a lot more used to just kind of being at home, being alone, etc., without giving it a second thought. So that's one big thing, and it comes at a cost because people are kind of losing social skills. People are ending up like feeling more isolated and lonely than ever. It's having an impact on our mental health. We're spending more time indoors than ever. The rates of like vitamin D deficiency are higher than they've ever been, which is again because of people just being inside. I think we have like the most streaming services we've ever had as well at this point in time. Let me just catch up on the comments. So B said a couple of years ago. Actually, wait, I'm much further. Okay, so right. So JG said they had a community and family, but loved each other deeply. They always told me they would pass together. Oh, so for anyone that missed that, JG was talking about how she had an uncle and an aunt who passed away within kind of a month of each other. So Jotty said, I attached very quickly and end up with suffering. Why? Am I doing something wrong? So, Jotty, are you talking about particularly in relationships? Because it's not necessarily about you kind of doing something wrong, but this is where like attachment styles can play a part, and understanding attachment styles will help to kind of help you to understand how you feel attached so quickly and why, and how you can temper that a little bit. So typically when it comes to attachment styles, anxious attachment, you feel really like you can feel like head over heels and really attached to someone super quickly without knowing them. So you kind of imagine a life with them and you're like, wow, this is the person for me. But before you've even like met them sometimes, right? And so, and you essentially, what happens is the amount of energy and investment that you have in a person typically with anxious attachment isn't like in line with how much you actually know about them, and also it's not in line with how much they've invested in you, and that's the problem. So it's not about you kind of trying to sort of orchestrate or do anything differently, or acting in a way that's not natural to you, but what it is about is thinking about, like, if I was approaching this from a kind of slightly logical, not emotional point of view, would I spend like 48 hours straight on the phone to this person? Would I like cancel my plans with my friends and see this person instead? There's a lot of kind of behaviors that with anxious attachment, or when you get attached to someone really quickly, particularly if you have anxious attachment, that just almost feel like impulsive, and it feels like you can't control yourself, and that's a little bit like the danger zone, and that's where it's probably an emotional response, and something like an attachment style is being triggered in you, rather than just like um what was I saying? Yeah, rather than just a logical, like, level-headed, secure response. So, okay. So, Lauren, you said, I can understand that, JG. I cannot imagine a life after my partner been together almost 40 years. Oh, that's so sweet. And Jay, you found live sessions yesterday and you're so happy. Yeah, and honestly, for anyone that hasn't been to loads of sessions here, there's some incredible, incredible teachers on here. And I would say that, like, I'm when I'm in flow, I'm I'm a much better teacher than I am today. I'm also not normally this harsh on myself, but if you watch the part one of this, you'll see the difference, and also it will kind of explain a lot more around the kind of foundational aspects of attachment styles, and how they typically show up and how they affect kind of different areas of our lives. So B said, a couple of years ago, me and one person I knew really well had an argument that ended the friendship. Since then, I haven't really let people in unless I knew them closely, like if they were family. Hopefully, I can be able to let more people in my life near the new year. But yeah, and I think B, it's about um, the pathway thing we talked about. Like, obviously, that kind of response is really normal, and it's kind of self-preservation, not wanting to get hurt again, etc. But that also comes at a cost. It comes at a price, right? Because you might have met people who could actually be really amazing, really wonderful, really supportive friends, and you've decided, or you've chosen to, like, protect yourself and protect your energy, and I guess keep yourself safe instead of letting them in. And I think another thing in those kinds of instances is, like, maybe it's worth thinking about how you let people in a way that's kind of comfortable for you. So that could be in small amounts, or slowly, or take your time, etc. But the other thing as well, the biggest kind of learning for me, is that quite often we don't know what is going on for other people, even if they tell us some stuff. Like, we don't really know um where someone's coming from, what's going on in their lives. And, like, it is difficult when things like that happen, but I think sometimes we need to, like, sometimes we just need to let things go. Let me see what else. But yeah, I think again, there's like that phrase, it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all. I think, like, that sentiment essentially. So Liz, you found Insight Timers during the pandemic. And Linda, you said, I was scared to go on a live for several months. Now I love them. Safe. And I think the great thing about the lives on here is, like, none of you are on camera. Like, I'm on camera. And I talked to Lauren quite a bit, just on message. And I realized, I was like, I've never seen her. I've never seen what she looks like, or I've never heard her voice. And obviously, but she listens to me on a weekly basis. She's one of my regulars and, like, biggest supporters. But she lives on the other side of the world. Hopefully one day we'll get to meet. Um, So, and B said you shared this app with friends online and some of your support workers who work with you. That's lovely. And JG said, Peter, wow, 40 years, beautiful. Yeah, I think it's amazing that you've been together 40 years. So Joe, you said, I'm finding the live and being able to say what's happening or feeling is non-judgmental and uplifting. I feel I'm being heard for the first time in a very long time. Oh, I'm so happy that you're enjoying and experiencing that, because that is the whole intention of the space, and that's really what I felt when I came here as well, as a participant. And I still go to loads of other teachers' lives. So after this, I don't know who I'm going to jump onto, but um, yeah, there's always like good stuff to listen to. And yeah, feel free to. So this is my teacher profile, but I've got like a personal profile as well. So feel free to add me as a friend on that one. But also, if you guys don't already follow me on here, please do. I'd really appreciate that. And the other ways that you can support me, we're supposed to talk about donations like 2 to 3 times in the live. But basically, Insight Timer is kind of the live sessions, particularly all of the teachers give their time for free. And then the kind of audience will typically, if you'd like to, or you're in a position to, will support us with donations. So you can donate to me via the donate button. I think the smallest amount is like $1.99 or something. Or if you're on an Apple device, because Apple take a cut, they take 30% of every donation for some reason. I also have a link to my PayPal if you want to donate that way. On That's in my link tree. So if you follow me and then click on the kind of about page, or there's like a website link, and then you can support me that way as well. But also, if you're not in a position to support me financially, you can. Oh, Melissa's here. So Melissa Manifests is one of my other like teachers that I really enjoy listening to on here. And but I would say I almost feel like we're going to be friends more than like the kind of teachery relationship. But we've been also like in touch and messaging, and she teaches and she does some really great sessions on here. I think, Melissa, you've got one today, haven't you? Or you had one today around full moon stuff? Oh, cool. Yeah, I was just Melissa. You'll know this. I was just doing the whole like support, follow, donation spiel. Um, but yeah. So guys, you can go and listen to Melissa after this. I don't know what Eastern time is in UK time, but also I don't know how many of you are here from the UK. But I was saying that so the ways you can support me is donating via here, or obviously via my link tree. There's a alternate for people on Apple devices. And then there's also I also have a YouTube channel, and I've started to post like short clips on there as well. So shorter form content, and then all of the last lives. So you guys can also just like, if you follow me on YouTube, I'm going to be posting a lot more content on there, and you can catch up on the first part of this where I talked about attachment styles. And it was a lot more about attachment styles. I think this will be great. So everybody you won't have to miss like any of this, or you won't have to miss any of Melissa's. So that's great. But yeah, Melissa, I'm gonna listen to you when I get ready for bed as well. And that was my plan. I kind of bookmarked that already today. I looked through everyone, because I also see sometimes like who's on at the same time as me, because I end up missing people sometimes, because like I miss some of my favorite teachers because I accidentally schedule at the same time. But there's like too many teachers that I love on here, so it's really hard to actually not have a conflict a lot of the time. But yeah, and the YouTube channel you can also find in my link tree. But basically, I'll type it in the chat. Well, Lauren usually does this for me. But all of the past Insight Timer lives are on there. So if you actually want to learn about anxious attachment in a really like specific, concrete way, you can do that. So I was actually speaking to Melissa. I haven't read her reply yet, but I was speaking to her about us potentially doing a live together. So yeah, hopefully it's a yes. But I also need to figure out like the tech logistics of that. So I was just getting a thing to read from the book, but I haven't quite got there yet. So we've only got half an hour left. The time has gone really quickly. So let's see. So Lauren was saying I resonate with that, Joe, and this was about, being able to share stuff on here in a non-judgmental way. And then, oh, Lauren, thank you. She said, Priyanka, you're awesome. And I'm reading out all the comments, because for people who watch on the YouTube, they can't see it. So Joe, you can see, so this is part 2 technically, but you can see part 1 on the YouTube channel. And actually I feel like this is like my 12th live. So although I haven't uploaded the first part yet, I'm a couple of weeks behind on uploading. But I've got like I think I've got 10 Insight Timer lives on there now. So oh Joe, yeah, you said sorry, part 1. Oh, hi Gary, nice to see you here. So B, you said you're starting to let more in now. You've got some really great friends now, but only a couple. And B, was there anything specific that you felt shifted for you where you felt comfortable letting people in? Or was there anything that made you feel like, oh, I need to start letting people in now? Jennifer, thank you so much for the donation. I'm just going through the comments one by one. So yeah, you guys won't miss Melissa. And yeah, Melissa, you'll definitely be down for it. Great. Guys, you've heard it here first. We're going to do a live together at some point. So let me find what I had to share with you guys. So so basically, hang on, because I do actually want to cover a little bit about attachment styles, since that was the whole point of this session. But I feel like we've had a different crowd and we've gone kind of down different rabbit holes. But every week we just see what happens. So, this is a bit from the book that I mentioned attached. So, and is my audio okay? Because I might just clip my mic so that I can actually just hold it and read. Don't know if it'll work. No, we'll hold it. So B, you said maybe, I don't know really, something like you said shifted in me and they just seem to be really nice people that I could really trust in my life. So I think one of the things there could be that, obviously if you've been coming to Insight Timer and like coming to lives here, learning, listening, like reading stuff, you've probably had a lot of like growth and evolution in and of yourself, and whether that feels tangible or you like realize it or not. Joe, thank you so much for the donation. That's really sweet of you. Gary, good to see you bouncing at the bottom of the screen, says Linda. Yeah. I mean, there's quite a few people at the bottom that I can see that I recognize the pictures. But yeah, please say hi in the chat if you're one of the regulars or if you haven't ever been here before. Yeah, B, every time I'm free and at home, I basically have Insight Timer on. So back to attachment. So the kind of heading of this section is attachment needs. They're not just for children. So there's a guy called, I think his name's John Bowlby, who kind of formed initial like attachment style stuff. But yeah, Bowlby always claimed that attachment is an integral part of human behavior throughout the entire lifespan. Then Mary Main discovered that adults too can be divided into. So actually, let me just paint a little picture on this front. So basically, way back when, I don't know when I say way back when, it's because I don't know the time period and I'm just kind of like speaking generically. But they initially thought that attachment styles were just related to children and how children react when their mother or their primary caregiver leaves the room and then comes back. So basically, some kids would, like, when the mother came back in, some kids would just kind of be happy to see them and then carry on playing. Other kids, when the mother left the room, would become really emotionally distressed. And when the mother then came back in, they were just like angry and distressed and like wouldn't want to talk to or go near the mother. And then there were other kids who would basically like be really emotionally distressed and cling on to the mother. And I'm sure you can see in those examples which is which. So like the avoidant child would basically ignore the mother, being like, you left me, like, screw you. The child that was secure would kind of be a bit upset when the mother left, but then, respond in a loving way and be happy that the mother's back. And then the anxiously attached child would still be upset and inconsolable even after the mother returned, and they'd be clinging on to them, like fearful that they would leave again. So yeah, so Mary Main discovered that adults too can be divided into attachment categories according to the way in which they recall their early relationship with their caregivers, which in turn influences their parental behaviour. So Cindy Hazan and Philip Shaver, independently of Mary Main's work, found that adults have distinct attachment styles in romantic settings as well. They discovered this by publishing a love quiz in the Rocky Mountain News. What is that? It sounds great. asking volunteers to mark the one statement out of 3 that best described their feelings and attitudes in relationships. The 3 statements correspond to the 3 attachment styles and read as follows. So if you guys want to put in the chat 1, 2, or 3, and we can see whether we have more people, which people we have kind of the most, which group we have the most people from today. So this is number 1. I find it relatively easy to get close to others, and I'm comfortable depending on them and having them depend on me. I don't often worry about being abandoned or about someone getting too close to me. This is the measure of the secure attachment style. That's definitely not me. I mean, it's me, but not in relationships. So if you're number 1 and you think you're number 1, pop that in the chat or just write the word secure. Number 2, I'm somewhat uncomfortable being close to others. I find it difficult to trust them completely, difficult to allow myself to depend on them. I'm nervous when anyone gets too close, and often love partners want me to be more intimate than I feel comfortable being. And this is measure of the avoidant attachment style. So that's number 2, and that's also definitely not me. Number 3, I find that others are reluctant to get as close as I would like. I often worry that my partner doesn't really love me or won't want to stay with me. I want to merge completely with another person, and this desire sometimes scares people away. And this one's measure of the anxious attachment style. And I'm laughing because Peter Brook put 3 in like several times. She's like 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Yep, same. Okay, so JG, you said secure now, but it's taken a while and you can fall back into the anxious attachment style. JG, what's your secret? What has helped you the most? And has it been being with someone who has secure attachment? Because that can really help. Put 3, but even more 3s than even more 3s than Peter Brook did. Richard also. Oh wait, Richard is a 2. Stephen is a 5. Stephen, so you're 2 plus 3, is that right? So you have, what's it called? It's like anxious avoidant. And B, really bad attachment issues sometimes. Huge awareness and feeling secure within myself. Yeah, so Richard, disorganized is a bit of a mix of them. But I think the thing that I find challenging about disorganized as a phrase is that basically all of us have little bits of all of the attachment styles, I find. So I think that I can be securely attached in some small ways, and I can be avoidant in some small ways. But overarching, the triggers, the things that trigger me the most and the biggest reactions I have are in the like anxious space. So yeah, but we're just talking about kind of mainly the primary attachment styles today, just because it's more of like an intro. But yeah, I have heard about fearful avoidant, although apparently they're like very rare. So, remarkably, the results showed a similar distribution of attachment styles in adults as that found in infants. Here, too, most respondents fell under the secure category, and the remaining subjects were divided between anxious and avoidant. The researchers also found that each style corresponded to very different and unique beliefs and attitudes about themselves, their partners, their relationships, and intimacy in general. Further studies by Hazan and Shaver and others corroborated these findings. It appears that, as Bowlby speculated, attachment continues to play a major role throughout our entire lifespan. The difference is that adults are capable of a high level of abstraction, so our need for the other person's continuous physical presence can at times be temporarily replaced by the knowledge that the person is available to us, psychologically and emotionally. But the bottom line is that the need for intimate connection and the reassurance of our partner's availability continues to play an important role throughout our lives. Unfortunately, just as the importance of the parent-child bond was disregarded in the past, today the significance of adult attachment goes unappreciated. Among adults, the prevailing notion is still that too much dependence in relationships is a bad thing. And that's one of the kind of key things that came up a lot in the book, that was like, actually, we are meant to be dependent on one another and in our relationships. And there's a lot of evidence to support that. Whereas, it's seen as being like needy or clingy or like having needs is a bad thing. So the codependency myth. The codependency movement and other currently popular self-help approaches portray relationships in a way that is remarkably similar to the views held in the first half of the 20th century about the child-parent bond. Remember the happy child who's free of unnecessary attachments? Today's experts offer advice that goes something like this. Your happiness is something that should come from within and should not be dependent on your lover or mate. And this is kind of, and I'm going to quickly pause. This is one of the reasons that I teach around this, is because everybody nowadays is kind of, we're all told about like the inner work and going inward and making ourselves happy, and like it all starts from you and inside you, etc., etc. But actually, that kind of undervalues and downplays the human need we have for connection, community, etc. So, yeah, yeah, your happiness is something that should come from within and should not be dependent on your lover or mate. Your well-being is not their responsibility, and theirs is not yours. Each person needs to look after himself or herself. In addition, you should learn not to allow your inner peace to be disturbed by the person you're closest to. If your partner acts in a way that undermines your sense of security, you should be able to distance yourself from the situation emotionally. Keep the focus on yourself and stay on an even keel. If you can't do that, there might be something wrong with you. You might be too enmeshed with the other person or codependent, and you must learn to set better boundaries. The basic premise underlying this point is that the ideal relationship is one between two self-sufficient people who unite in a mature, respectful way while maintaining clear boundaries. If you develop a strong dependency on your partner, you're deficient in some way and are envisioned to work on yourself. No, sorry. And are advised to work on yourself to become more differentiated and develop a greater sense of self. The worst possible scenario is that you will end up needing your partner, which is equated with an addiction to them. And addiction, we all know, is a dangerous prospect. While the teachings of codependency remain immensely helpful in dealing with family members who suffer from substance abuse, as was the initial intention, they can be misleading and even damaging when applied indiscriminately to all relationships. Karen, whom we met earlier in the televised race, has been influenced by these schools of thought, but biology tells a very different story. So I read the story about this in the first video about Karen, which some of you might know. But that will make sense, but that's a really interesting and quite surprising thing. The biological truth. Numerous studies show that once we become attached to someone, the two of us form one physiological unit. Our partner regulates our blood pressure, our heart rate, our breathing, and the level of hormones in our blood. We are no longer separate entities. The emphasis on differentiation that is held by most of today's popular psychology approaches to adult relationships does not hold water from a biological perspective. Dependency is a fact. It is not a choice or a preference. How many of you knew this? Because this was one of the big things for me that I found really, really mind-blowing. Because I'd heard a lot about the kind of, previous stuff around, codependency is bad, etc., etc. So a study conducted by James Cohen is particularly illuminating to that effect. Dr. James Cohen is the director of the Affective Neuroscience Laboratory at the University of Virginia. He investigates the mechanisms through which close social relationships and broader social networks regulate our emotional responses. In this particular study, which he conducted in collaboration with Richard Davidson and Hilary Schaefer, he used functional MRI technology to scan the brains of married women. This is the thing I was talking about earlier. While these women were being scanned, Dr. Cohen and his colleagues simulated a stressful situation by telling them that they were about to receive a very mild electric shock. Normally, under stressful conditions, the hypothalamus becomes activated. And indeed, this is what happened in the experiment to the women when they were alone, awaiting the shock. Their hypothalamus lit up. Next, they tested the women who were holding a stranger's hand while they waited. This time, the scans showed somewhat reduced activity in the hypothalamus. And when the hand that the women held was their husband's, the dip was much more dramatic. Their stress was barely detectable. Furthermore, the women who benefited most from spousal hand-holding were those who reported the highest marital satisfaction, but we'll get back to this point later. The study demonstrates that when two people form an intimate relationship, they regulate each other's psychological and emotional well-being. Their physical proximity and availability influences the stress response. How can we be expected to maintain a high level of differentiation between ourselves and our partners if our basic biology is influenced by them to such an extent. It seems that Karen, from our example, instinctively understood the healing effect of holding her partner's hand under stressful conditions. Unfortunately, she later gave in to common misconceptions and viewed her instinct as a weakness, something to be ashamed of. I'm going to take a little second to breathe. Does anyone have any thoughts or feedback on what I've shared so far? Just taking a second to find the next thing I'm going to share. Because we've got 15 minutes. So does anyone, I am going to actually ask now, so you can start thinking if you do have any. Has anyone got any questions or anything that they want to share that we can kind of support you on? Because we do that in these sessions. Like, people always come with, what they have in mind or what we can help with. So, there's, what did B say? I like the idea of me making my own happiness rather than relying on someone or something that can let me down. Yeah, and I think what's interesting there is that that is the first time I've ever yawned on one of my lives. It's been a long week, to be honest. But the thing that I was going to say with that is that I think it is easy sometimes to just kind of rely on ourselves, and especially I think if you've got an avoidant attachment style, but I think it's coming from more of a place of like self-preservation than from a kind of because I guess B, what it depends on is whether you're coming from a place of kind of trying to protect yourself and trying to keep yourself safe, or if it's kind of because you genuinely like prefer your own company, or you genuinely whether it comes from the fear. I guess I'm wording this so badly, or I'm not wording it at all. I think it depends on whether it's more from a place of like fear of being let down or actually seeking your own happiness, like which of those two things is the bigger driving force. So, and this is where, the dependency paradox comes in, and maybe, by avoiding getting close to anyone, you don't have to worry about this, which creates some level of safety. But obviously, before brain imaging technology was developed, John Bowlby understood that our need for someone to share our lives with is part of our genetic makeup and has nothing to do with how much we love ourselves or how fulfilled we feel on our own. He discovered that once we choose someone special, powerful and often uncontrollable forces come into play. New patterns of behavior kick in, regardless of how independent we are and despite our conscious wills. Once we choose a partner, there is no question about whether dependency exists or not. It always does. An elegant coexistence that does not include uncomfortable feelings of vulnerability and fear of loss sound good, but it is not our biology. What proved through evolution to have a strong survival advantage is a human couple becoming one physiological unit, which means that if she's reacting, then I'm reacting, or if he's upset, that also makes me unsettled. They are a part of me, and I'll do anything to save them. Having such a vested interest in the well-being of another person translates into a very important survival advantage for both parties. Despite variations in the way people with different attachment styles learn to deal with these powerful forces, the secure and anxious types embrace them, and the avoidants tend to suppress them. All three attachment styles are programmed to connect with a special someone. In fact, Chapter 6 describes a series of experiments that demonstrates that avoidants have attachment needs but actively suppress them. And that's interesting too, because I wonder, B, what you were saying, and obviously like that kind of little tidbit is that, avoidants do actually have attachment needs but actively suppress them. And does anyone in here who has more of an avoidant attachment style, does that relate at all, or are you suppressing them so much that it doesn't feel like that's the case? So, does that mean that in order to be happy in a relationship, we need to be joined with our partner at the hip, or give up other aspects of our life, such as our careers or friends? Paradoxically, the opposite is true. It turns out that the ability to step into the world on our own often stems from the knowledge that there is someone beside us whom we can count on. This is the dependency paradox. The logic of this paradox is hard to follow at first. How can we act more independently by being thoroughly dependent on someone else? If we had to describe the basic premise of adult attachment in one sentence, it would be: if you want to take the road to independence and happiness, find the right person to depend on and travel down it with that person. Once you understand this, you've grasped the essence of attachment theory. To illustrate this principle, let's take another look at childhood, where attachment starts. While adult and childhood attachment styles are not one and the same, nothing better demonstrates the idea we're conveying than what is known in the field as the strange situation test. Does anyone know about the strange situation test? Because I'm going to share that'll be kind of one of the last things that I share before we wrap up in 10 minutes. But just as okay, cool. So that'll be new to you guys. I'll definitely share that. Just before I kind of go into that last bit, I meant to do this 3 times in my life according to Insight Timer, but I guess we'll do it too. Thank you first of all to all of you for being here. We've got 160 meditators here right now, which is lovely, and a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new people. And I hope that you had a nice time with us today, and that you come again when I'm a little bit less under the weather and a little bit more kind of on form. And what I was going to say was, if you guys aren't already following me on Insight Timer, I'd really love if you can give me a follow on here. And also, I put all of my previous live sessions on YouTube. So there was a session before this one that isn't uploaded yet, but it's a lot more focused on attachment styles, and it's a lot more kind of in depth than this one. I think this one we had a lot of kind of chats and interaction, and so it was a bit more kind of free flowing, sort of cute, sort of conversational Q&A kind of vibes. But yeah, if you can give me a follow on here on YouTube, and also if you are in a position to support me with a donation, that'd be really greatly appreciated. At the moment, this is my main source of income after kind of going through redundancy earlier in the year. So yeah, I mean, I'm working on some like voluntary projects and stuff with kind of Stephen, who's also in the chat. But yeah, so you can donate to me either via Insight Timer or the donate button here. And I think the smallest amount is like $1.99, or you can also find my PayPal in my link tree. Thank you, Lauren. Which, if you've got an Apple device, Apple take 30%. So it kind of helps you not have to kind of deal with that. And the kind of donations go straight to teachers like me. The other thing I was going to say is that, yeah, I just appreciate all of you being here, and I really enjoy doing these lives. And I kind of typically do show up regardless of if I'm under the weather or not in flow. So some days are better than others, and I feel like this is maybe the kind of, I just thought of the word like jankiest, which isn't a word that I ever really use, but this is one of my jankier lives. But I've still really enjoyed it, and I think we've had a lot of really lovely interaction from everyone in the chat as well. So that brings us on to the strange situation test. But yeah, thanks for being here, everyone, and thanks for all the support. So, Sarah and her 12-month-old daughter Kimmy enter a room full of toys. A friendly young research assistant is waiting. I don't stumble over my words as much as I have been today. Bear with me. I've got really like swollen tonsils, and I'm just trying to like heal at the moment. So Sarah and her 12-month-old daughter Kimmy enter a room full of toys. A friendly young research assistant is waiting in the room and exchanges a few words with them. Kimmy starts to explore this newfound toy heaven. She crawls around, picks up toys, throws them to the ground, and checks whether they rattle, roll, or light up, while glancing at her mum from time to time. Then Kimmy's mother is instructed to leave the room. She gets up and quietly walks out. The minute Kimmy realizes what's happened, she becomes distraught. She crawls over to the door as quickly as she can, sobbing. She calls out to her mother and bangs on the door. The research assistant tries to interest Kimmy in a box of colourful building blocks, but this only makes Kimmy more agitated, and she throws one of the blocks in the research assistant's face. When her mother returns to the room, after a short while, Kimmy rushes towards her on all fours and raises her arms to be held. The two embrace, and Sarah calmly reassures her daughter. Kimmy hugs her mum tight and stops sobbing. Once she's at ease again, Kimmy's interest in the toys reawakens, and she resumes her play. The experiment Sarah and Kimmy participated in is probably the most important study in the field of attachment theory, referred to as a strange situation test. The version described here is an abbreviated version of the test. Mary Ainsworth was fascinated by the way in which children's exploratory drive, their ability to play and learn, could be aroused or stifled by their mother's presence or departure. She found that having an attachment figure in the room was enough to allow a child to go into a previously unknown environment and explore with confidence. This presence is known as a secure base. It is the knowledge that you are backed by someone who is supportive and whom you can rely on with 100% certainty and turn to in times of need. A secure base is a prerequisite for a child's ability to explore, develop, and learn. So, a secure base for grown-ups. I think this is the last bit we will add. Oh, B. So you said since the option of Google Pay is gone, you can no longer access the donation page. Ah, that's really strange. So even via on the live itself, you can try the. There's a link in my link tree. Otherwise, if you drop me a message, I can see if I can find a alternate via Google Pay or whatever if you'd like to donate that way. But otherwise, we can yeah. But thank you for thinking of donating or trying. But I think PayPal might be the better way to do it, or maybe using a different device. But if anyone does want to donate via my PayPal, if you go in my link tree in my profile, so if you follow me as a teacher on here, go into my link tree and then there's a link to support me with donations there. So secure base for okay, B, got it. So your screen reader won't read the current page setup that's here now. Okay. Don't worry about it. Thank you for being here with us anyway. So a secure base for grown-ups. As adults, we don't play with toys anymore, but we do have to go out into the world and deal with novel situations and difficult challenges. We want to be highly functional at work, at ease and inspired in our hobbies, and compassionate enough to care for our children and partners. If we feel secure, like the infant in the strange situation test, when her mother is present, the world is at our feet. We can take risks, be creative, and pursue our dreams. And if we lack that sense of security, if we're unsure where the person closest to us, our romantic partner, truly believes in us and supports us and will be there for us in times of need, we'll find it much harder to maintain focus and engage in life. As in the strange situation test, when our partners are thoroughly dependable and make us feel safe, and especially if they know how to reassure us during the hard times, we can turn our attention to all the other aspects of life that make our existence meaningful. Brooke Feeney, the director of the Carnegie Mellon University Relationship Lab, that was a mouthful, illustrates how a secure base works in adult relationships. Dr. Feeney is particularly interested in studying the way in which partners get and give support to each other and the factors that determine the quality of that support. In one of her studies, Dr. Feeney asked couples to discuss their personal goals and exploratory opportunities with one another in the lab. When participants felt that their goals were supported by their partner, they reported an increase in self-esteem and an elevated mood after the discussion. They also rated higher the likelihood of achieving their goals after the discussion than before it. Participants who felt that their partner was more intrusive and or less supportive, on the other hand, were less open to discussing their goals, did not confidently examine ways for achieving those goals, and tended to downgrade their goals during the course of the discussion. Back to Karen and Tim, our reality TV show couple. In many ways, their experience is a close adult equivalent to the strange situation test for children. So you guys should catch up on the first video, which mentions this bit that they're referring to now. So just as Karen needed Tim's hand for encouragement, and Tim gathered strength from Karen's reassurance, Kimmy wanted her mother's presence. Karen engaged in protest behaviour, not agreeing to continue until he held her hand, just as Kimmy had done when she called out for her absent mother. Both needed the reassurance of their attachment figures before they could focus on the other tasks. Only once their secure base was restored could they go back to other activities. So I'm going to leave that there because it's just about to be 10:30, which is our kind of wrap-up time, and My throat is a little bit sore, so I would do sometimes go over, but I'm gonna give my throat a rest today. But I will catch up on the comments before I go. So Joe said me avoidance. Stephen, you said yeah, that relates. And Lauren, you said this has shifted my perception to a more grateful perspective in my primary relationship. So Joe, you said I'm 64, had a horrendous childhood. Now I understand it's from my childhood. Yeah, and an interesting thing, Joe, about that is like for me as well, I didn't have a particularly like easy or comfortable childhood. And like a lot of the teachers on Insight Timer that I'm listening to say that while, while we have these things and we carry like certain baggage and, you know, trauma and wounds, it's really up to us, obviously, where we go from there and how we move forward and, where we go next. And that's something that I'm really trying to kind of learn and grow from. And there's a teacher on here called Mikhail he's quite like direct, but I really love his energy. I was listening to him last night and he was saying, and he always says, he's always like, oh, but Mikhail, this happened to me when I was a child. And he was like, yeah, that may be the case, but, and he talks quite lightheartedly. And he basically says that, but, 20, 30, 40 years later, if you're still clinging on to that thing that happened to you or one thing that someone said or, then you're doing yourself a disservice. And it's up to us whether we want to kind of like be in victim mode or kind of sort of still like overcome and succeed and grow. So let me check what else we had. So B said, sorry, you didn't answer the question. You had to go and quickly do something and missed what I said. Don't worry, all good. I don't remember what I said, so it's fine. But yeah, thank you. So it's Mikhail. Can you type it in the chat, please, Lauren? Because I'm typing one-handedly and I'm very slow. But it's Mikhail Patrick Bovenez, I believe. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But he's one of my favorite teachers on here as well. But yeah, I think we'll leave it at that unless anyone has any kind of questions or closing remarks. As I said, if you don't already follow me here, please give me a follow. Melissa's live is when's your live? Is it in half an hour? Or is it no, it's like in an hour, I think. Yeah, I think it's in an hour. And yeah, Joe, Lauren or Peterbrook has just put it in the chat. Yeah, so thank you guys for being here. And if you want kind of a little bit more information on all of the attachment stuff that I've been talking about, the first video has a lot more info on that. I've also finally added descriptions to all of the Insight Timer lives that I upload on YouTube, so you actually know what the different topics are. Like there's one that's kind of around I guess like roadblocks to connection. There's another one. I'll actually look through now and I can tell you so that you know what you're kind of looking for. Let's see, what do we have? So we have roadblocks to creating, roadblocks to creating community and connection and how to overcome them. How to attract serendipitous connections and make the most of every opportunity. When things go wrong, navigating conflict in connection and relationships. Creating community and authentic, meaningful connections. Guinea pigs and good vibes, which was just like a Friday hangout. It was like a community hangout and Q&A, and I got the piggies out. Communication skills for authentic, meaningful connection is another one. Another one was using our values to identify and create communities around us that help us grow. So yeah, that's kind of the range of previous sessions that we've had. So Lauren said honey, lemon, ginger tea, and pineapple juice, and then licorice separately. All good for your throat, Priyanka. Thank you. I will definitely take that on board, and I do have some pineapple juice in the fridge actually. Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for your support through giving me your time and your energy through your contributions in the comments. For those of you who've supported me or are in a position to support with a donation, I really, really appreciate that, and it helps me to kind of keep doing my work on here, and it helps pay for things like microphones and lights and stuff. So really appreciate that. And yeah, as always, it's a pleasure to kind of hang out. And let's go to Melissa's live. I think it's Melissa, is it in an hour? And for those of you who had your first time on Insight, or first time with me on one of my lives, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come back when I'm feeling better and I'm more on form. But yeah, thanks for everything. Thanks for being here, guys. And Melissa, I will reply to your message shortly. Oh, Meg James is now cool. Amazing. Yeah, I mean, there's loads of really good teachers on here all the time, so you will never struggle to find like great people to listen to. Does anyone have anything else to add before I sign off? I always find that as I'm going to end it and hit the end button, that's when people add comments and then I miss them right at the end. But thank you, everybody. And I've also scheduled next week's live, which will be on Thursday again next week at the same time. I don't have a kind of topic in mind yet, but usually it ends up being whatever kind of comes to me during the week, or things that feel right, depending on what I'm kind of reading, listening to, watching, etc. But yeah, thank you for being here, everyone. Have a great night. Bye.